to go find the link. So do you want the link for your page, or do you care?
You can send it to me. I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
If I put it up, then probably my 5 leftists will go nuts. They're the most active on my page, so I typically don't read much what they say.
All right, let's see. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Sure.
There it is.
There it is. Okay.
And let's make sure we're live. We are. There, Jason's on with us, so I know that we're at least streaming. Okay. As usual, I'm going to give a minute or so for people to find the notification that we're live, and we're doing our Friday Night Live again from the Duck Room and, of course, the Dodger Room. So hello, Jason. Hello, Sarah, and anybody else joining us. We're doing it a little bit like I did a month or two ago. We're simulcasting on Google Meet so that I could have a guest on with me today, so it's not just me yakking, but we'll have somebody else. And what I want to do is, if you will hang on to your comments and questions, we're going to present sort of this information to you and then be glad to take your questions. And what I have to do, just so you understand, I'm switching back and forth between the Google Meet screen and the Facebook screen so that I can see your comments. So I see a lot of people saying hello and good evening, and I say hi to all of you. I'll come back to your questions if you can kind of hold those for just a little bit so that I can focus on what we're going to talk about. So with me tonight is a guy who I consider a dear friend and, of course, a colleague in the Oregon House of Representatives, Representative Werner Reschke. He represents a big chunk of southeast Oregon, but he lives, as he told me the first time we met, he lives in Malin, Oregon. And if you don't know where Malin, Oregon is, just trust me. As he says, it's a 9-iron shot, depending on how good of a golfer you are, from California. He's way down there. So Werner, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And it looks like Mrs. Reschke put you up in the attic again.
She did. She put me in the upper room, we call it.
We, for those of you, of course, you wouldn't know, we do caucus meetings and various other meetings on Zoom and Teams and whatnot. And this is what he always looks like, is in this, the roof looks like it's 2 inches from his head.
That's right. It's just barely get up there, yeah.
Okay.
Makes me feel...
Oh, I lost you. He froze. There we go. Okay. Here's what I want to do. I want to give a little background. Let's go back in time to 2011. In 2011, the regular session was held, and for those of you who are new to Oregon politics or just weren't paying attention in those days, 2011 was the first session that was done with a completely split House. The Oregon House was 30-30, Republicans and Democrats. Oh, how we long for those days.
No kidding.
It was 30-30. There were co-speakers. There were co-chairs of every committee. It was co everything. And the Senate, I don't remember what the Senate was that particular year. I don't have that in front of me.
I think it was 14-16. I think it was
close.
Close.
Yeah. And then Betsy Johnson made it
Yep.
sort of the 15-15.
Yeah.
So what happened was, to give a little more background, in 2011, there were far fewer bills submitted and obviously passed because you had to get that by 30-30. So the far left stuff and the far right stuff didn't really fly. You kind of had to go down the middle, which is what so many of us would like to see happen again. But this particular bill, it wasn't a bill, it was actually a House Joint Resolution. It was HJR 7. And I just want to give you a quick background because this is what brought us to where we are today with what could potentially happen, and that is a catastrophic Article 10A special session. Let me give you a little history. From the 76th Oregon Legislative Assembly of 2011, HJR 7C, which, by the way, the carrier and chief sponsor of the bill was Senator Brian Boquist. And the reason I think that's important is so that people understand this was not a partisan issue. And when I give you the vote count, you'll see why. This was an issue that almost everybody in the building agreed needed to be taken care of. Keep in mind, that year, 2011, or right thereabouts, the disaster in Japan had happened. Fukushima, the earthquake and tsunami that wiped out so many things. And it was horrible. And at the same time, we were first learning about the Cascadia subduction, the potential for the big one in Oregon. And so it says right here, the background, Oregon does not currently have an established plan for legislative succession after a catastrophic disaster. Proposed resolutions for a constitutional amendment have been introduced in prior sessions, but none have yet been adopted and referred to the voters. So, in the committees that were held for this particular joint resolution, things that were discussed were, what happens if the big one hits, and let's say, and I'm not making light here, but let's say 20, 25, whatever, however many of the state reps or state senators are literally killed or displaced or knocked around or whatever, and they can't meet in the legislature to pass anything to help those of us who survived this massive disaster. And so that's what they basically discussed all throughout, and I went back and read and listened to a lot of the testimony. So what happened was the bill basically said it proposes an amendment of the Oregon Constitution to provide for government action in the event of a catastrophic disaster. Here are the keys. This is when it was a resolution, or a bill if you want to call it that, but it was a resolution. Grants the governor temporary authority to redirect general fund and lottery monies for 30 days following declaration of disaster, unless legislature extends or passes law specifying use of funds, permits extension of time limit with the approval of 3/5 of each chamber able to attend, and requires bill establishing termination date, permits legislative operation in location other than Capitol, and with quorum of 2/3 of members able to attend, rather than 2/3 of total members, refers proposed amendment for vote in special election on same date as next general election. So again, it passed almost unanimously. There were 30 voted yes of the 30 in the Senate, 57 in the House, the 3 no votes, just so I give credit where credit is due. Then 3 of them are gone. 1 is over in the House, or in the Senate now. Representative Freeman, Thatcher, and Wingard voted no on this, the only no's in the entire building. So then it was referred to the ballot in November of 2012, and it was ballot measure 77. And it passed 58.71% to 41.29%. So 58 to 41, 42 about. And basically this is what it said. The official ballot title was Amends Constitution. Governor may declare catastrophic disaster defined, and it is defined, and it was in the voters pamphlet statement, requires legislative session, authorize suspending specified constitutional spending restrictions. Okay. So, there was a certain radio show host that I know very well, who's not on the radio anymore, who was screaming at the top of his lungs and did a live show. I went back and found it, and I wish I could play it for you tonight. Who was at the Capitol in 2011, in June of 2011, begging the members to vote no on this because there's a little tiny 2-word portion of what is a catastrophic disaster, and it said public health. And something about that scared me in 2011, and it scared me in 2012 when this ballot measure came up, and I said, folks, don't vote for this thing. Somehow they're going to try to abuse it. 8 years later, here we are. And that's why I wanted to have Representative Reschke on tonight, because he is so good at understanding these things, and I wanted him to explain a little bit. So how, Werner, did we get from this to what could potentially happen now?
a great history and background. I learned something, so thank you very much. It was worth my time coming on. So the definition of this Article 10A, catastrophic disaster, again, as you said, it's supposed to be for a catastrophic disaster. And the provisions in it are if, let's say, a Cascadia event happened and an earthquake happened and all the bridges on I-5 went out and all the roads between Eastern Oregon to Salem were out, and there were fires burning and people were starving and you'd want the legislature, you'd want your government to do something more than what it was doing before. And so that's the kind of disaster this bill was supposed to be, or this article is supposed to address. So acts of terror, in the bill it gives you some, or the article, it says acts of terrorism, earthquakes, floods, public health emergency, tsunami, volcanic eruption, war are the 7 or 8 examples they give. And as you, I think, properly pointed out, one of these things was not like the other. And you have to go back to Sesame Street for that reference. But the public health emergency, I guess if there was some sort of biological weapon that went off or something like that, or if we had people lined up in the streets dying, I think that might be a public health emergency. But this governor has decided that what we're seeing today is a public health emergency, and so that will give her pretext to calling such a declaration.
So you agree that there was good intention behind the bill, the resolution, which became a ballot measure, and the intention was, holy moly, the big one hits, and legislators and the governor, let's say, can't get in to do anything to release funds to help the people who are cut off from the world.
Right, exactly. That's basically, if you, I mean, the way you framed it and the way it, the event at the time was Fukushima, like you said, the massive earthquake in Japan that knocked out the nuclear plant that caused all sorts of problems over there. That's what's going on in the world as this is being discussed, and everybody's worried about the big one happening here, the Cascadia event that everybody predicts is going to happen. And so that's what this was really built around.
Speaking of, by the way, one of the members that is not with us anymore, she's alive, I'm just saying not in the body anymore, who voted yes on this was former Representative Julie Parrish. And I talked to her the other day about this, and she said, yes, that's what we talked about. We didn't really talk about a COVID-19 type thing. Of course, there was no such thing, but I mean, that wasn't even in the talk. So
right.
Let me ask you this. You and I spoke earlier today. There were, for lack of a better term, there are some boxes that have to be checked in
right.
order for this to be declared a disaster. And there's some pretty specific ones. Do you have those in front of you?
Yeah, I do. So there's, in section 1.4, I think it's A and B, there's basically 2 sets of criteria that need to be met. And so in the first set of criteria, there's 4 items. You just have to check 1 box out of those 4 items. And then there's a second set of 4 items, and you have to check a box in one of those. So if you get 1 in A and 1 in B, you can declare a catastrophic disaster. So those items are, in A it says, let's see, is this it? 4A. Nope, that's not it. I have lost my place, so give me a second.
That's all right. And for those of you just joining us...
No, I'm sorry, it's not in section 4, it's in section 1A and B.
All right.
So it's the first set of things is extraordinary levels of death, extraordinary injury, extraordinary property damage, or extraordinary disruption in daily life in the state.
All right, so let's pause there for a moment.
One of those has to be true.
All right, so let's pause there for a moment.
What's that?
Okay, let's pause there for a moment. So
Yep.
you said we have to check 1 box in A.
1 box in there.
I know this will be somewhat controversial. A lot of people have died of COVID. We acknowledge that, and we know that. But describe again what it said about the deaths.
It says extraordinary levels of death. The actual text says this catastrophic disaster has results in extraordinary levels of death, injury, property damage, or disruption of daily life in this state.
Okay, from what I've seen of OHA's numbers, there is not an extraordinary amount of deaths. There are of COVID, but COVID did not exist last year. There are as many deaths as normal.
Right.
Okay.
You can't compare year to year
Right.
like you could, say, the flu or tuberculosis or some other communicable disease.
So that would mean
so-
injuries and death. We don't have an extraordinary amount. There has not been wasn't it loss of property?
It's property damage.
Property damage. Okay. So the fourth one.
Think in the legislator's mind in 2011 as they're going through this. What kind of disaster are they thinking of? They're thinking of a big earthquake. They're thinking of a big volcanic eruption. They're thinking of a big tsunami. They're thinking that way. They're not thinking about public health.
Right. So the fourth one is maybe the kind of sorta. Is that the one? What was that again?
It's a disruption to daily life in this state.
Okay. Now that one may be the one that she hangs her hat on.
Right. So let's go to the second set,
Okay.
and then I'll give you my thought on both of these.
Okay.
So the second set is severely affects the population, infrastructure, environment, economy, or government from functioning in this state. So again, it severely affects the population, infrastructure, environment, economy, or government functioning in the state. So one of those has to be true.
All right. And you're
Right.
again
And
to
so-
reemphasize, box A needs one
Box A.
check. Box B needs one check.
Right.
All right. Go ahead.
So if I look at box A, the levels of death, injury, property damage, and disruption to daily life, I can pretty much make a good argument that the outbreak of this virus has not done that. What I can make an argument for is the governor's reaction with all her executive orders has caused all that. So today, in a conference call with an attorney from the legislative office, I proposed that question saying, can the governor do something in her executive orders that causes one of these to happen? And at first he said no, and then later on he said yes. And so it was interesting because I don't think they can check any of these boxes, because otherwise a governor could create circumstances through executive order that cause one of these to be checked so they can declare a catastrophic disaster.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like it was the intent of the bill or the intent of the article or the resolution.
No.
And the second set is exactly the same, that severely affects the population, infrastructure, economy, or government functioning. What's caused that? Is it the virus, the outbreak of this virus? I'd argue no, because I think what's caused severely affects all those things, or any of those things, are government mandates by the governor's executive orders. So again, she's the one who has been causing these things, not the virus in and of itself. And so I don't see in the list of examples acts of terrorism, earthquake, flood, public health emergency, tsunami, volcanic eruption, war, that it also says government executive orders.
I want to tell the people who may have been joining us late, this is Werner Reschke. He's the representative from down in the Klamath Falls area, along with me on Friday Night Live. What he just talked about, having that meeting today with, in essence, what is the legislature's attorney, legislative counsel. Very seldom do I see that gentleman pause when he's asked a question and mouth drop open and really not have a good answer. And you got him with that. Not that I'm saying gotcha, but you got him with a brilliant question.
And I wasn't trying to get him. I
No.
was just trying to understand how he would interpret this statute in light of the fact that we talked a lot about the minutia of the bill or the article. We talked about how session would work, how it wouldn't work, and all that. But I'm further upstream, as it were, because I don't think that she has the conditions on the ground to even call it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, okay, so what, and we talked about this today as a group. We've had individual discussions. We've talked ad nauseum, those of us who are in the House, as to what does this mean? What does this mean if, whether it's tomorrow, next week, there is some important parts about when. If she were to call this Article 10A catastrophic disaster special session, if she were to call it tomorrow, it means one thing. If she were to call it on December 22nd, it would mean something else. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's provisions in this that she can't, when she makes the declaration and then she calls a special session, but she can't call a special session if you're within a 30-day window of having a regular session. So your example of today, if she called it, she would then call a special session, and it could go on for 30 days.
No more.
No more.
No more than
unless the legislature extends it, which is not a good thing. But I think a simple majority of the legislature could extend that emergency declaration, I think, to date certain. So it's not just another 30 days for however long the legislature thinks. But if it was on the 22nd of December, then we're within 30 days of the legislature meeting on January 19th, 2021. So she couldn't call a special session. She'd have to wait until the 19th to begin that special session, but the clock starts on the 30 days when she makes the declaration. So all that time would be used up. She could do things, but the legislature wouldn't be there to support or aid or help her, except for about 3 days into the first part of the session.
There was a lot of discussion about the idea, and I don't want to get too technical and minutia here, but layering was talked about.
Yeah.
That's why I point out the date thing. If she declared an emergency on, say, the 22nd of December, we start session January 19th. There are rules and procedures in this Article 10A special session that would overlay the regular session. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yes. So all the there's three things that I see that are in the the high level. It changes the quorum rules. Which means that if they brought forth a cap and trade bill, saying that this was to address the emergency of climate change, and that was part of her declaration, then we couldn't walk out because the quorum rules get changed to not just 2/3 of 60 members in the House or 2/3 of 30 members in the Senate. It's 2/3 of the members who are able to appear. So if you got 12 members to show up, then it would just take you 8 members to make a quorum, and there you go.
And they could pass.
12 members. Yes, I mean, it's really bad.
And that's there's a lot of me, Werner, that doesn't want to scare people, but I also want people to understand, because most people are going about their lives, they're doing their job, they're doing whatever, they don't pay attention to this kind of stuff, nor should they. I mean, they should,
right.
But I mean, it's not their job, it's our job to then tell you. And the scary part here is I've had so many people say thank you for walking out last year to stop cap and trade, or this past spring. It feels like last year, but this past spring.
Yeah.
We would not be able to walk out. We can do nothing as
could
Republicans.
Walk out, but it wouldn't change the ability for them to meet and conduct business, because they could get quorum, just because of the way that the emergency powers. And again, think of the tsunami, think of the massive earthquake. The idea was, if you could get half of your legislature together, then you'd get 2/3 of them to show up for quote quorum, so that you could pass these emergency declarations. Because if bridges are out or roads are out and telephone lines are out and internet's out, you cobble together the best you can at that point. But we're not in that situation yet. This would apply.
And Werner, I don't know how, I don't pay attention to how much you get feedback from, because you deal with your constituents and you deal with your people who follow you on Facebook and whatnot. I've been hit a lot by people on the right, for the most part, who are saying, you guys aren't doing anything, you're too quiet, what's the matter with you guys, how come you don't do this or that or the other thing? I probably should have said from the very beginning, to establish credentials here, you're looking at one over there, or whichever side he's on, who scored 100% on the Conservative Union. Okay, you can't get, unless there's a 101 that I'm not sure of, but 100%. I scored a 95, so I'm lame. Slacker. Thank you. But we're pretty conservative guys. But we also understand reality of what really is. And this kind of a thing coming up, there's nothing we can do except do what we're doing right now, which is our voice.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's can't you do something, can't you do something, can't you do something? And the thing with politics is you really can't unless you have a majority, right? The minority is basically an opposition voice, and unless they can bring arguments forth that convert some of the majority to voting against their caucus, which is incredibly difficult these days, then you're going to get what I call run over. And we've been run over before, and we're probably going to get run over again. So you try to do the best you can. You try to make the best message points. You try to communicate the best. But until Oregonians give Republicans a majority in either the House or the Senate or both, this is what you're going to see.
This is not a popular statement that I make, and I've made it several times. I've made it at Republican gatherings and at other places. I'm as much pro-Constitution as there is in the state. You are. Your senator is legendary for his quotes of the Constitution, Senator Dennis Linthicum. Here's what I say. The Constitution is only as good as the judges that you own. And I don't mean to say that in a way of like somebody owns, like because of their wallet or whatever. But my favorite saying is from the Mel Brooks movie, History of the World Part 1, where the King of France, Louis, whatever, the 18th, does whatever he wants in the scene and turns to the camera and says, "It's good to be the king." I hate to say this to people, but you can scream at me, it's anti-constitutional, it's non-constitutional. Yeah, it is. They're in charge.
Yep. And all we can do is continue to remind Oregonians of that. If you don't like what you're seeing, then don't vote Democrat, right? I mean, you can't continue to vote the same way and then complain about the way things are. You can't not be involved in campaigns and say, I'm going to complain the way things are. Voting is one thing, but it's just not enough. The other side is far, far, far more engaged.
Speaking of voting, I don't have it right here in front of me. I could get to it, but I pulled up today from the Secretary of State certified the election. I think it was today or yesterday.
Yeah.
And it showed the county by county turnout. Number one, I believe, was Malheur or Wheeler. I get them confused, one or the other.
Yeah.
And then the bottom was another Eastern Oregon county, and yours was down towards the bottom of the list, Lake and Klamath. My point of saying that, and mine, Marion, was middle to bottom. I always hear, and I know you hear it too, rural people are not being heard in that legislature. Rural people are not being heard. Well, Multnomah County turned out at 80+%. It was close to 84, 85%. Lake County and Malheur County and Wheeler County and Union County and Josephine County and Jackson County turned out in the low 70s. So guys, don't keep screaming at us that we're not listening to the rural people. You're not voting.
I would agree with that in the sense that our power is not our title or our position. Our power comes from the people.
Yeah.
And this is a team sport in Salem. It is not a individual sport. It is a team sport. And if your team doesn't have enough players, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And we've been losing. So fortunately, we picked up a seat this time. We have to do better. But it's all about winning elections. I think it was Congressman Greg Walden once said this, and it's always stuck in my mind, is that when you're in the majority, you govern, and when you're in the minority, you try to get in the majority. Meaning that's all you do is try to get in the majority. Don't try to govern. Don't try to do this. Don't try to do that. Don't try to be cute. Try to do everything you can to position yourself for the next election to be in the position that you are in the majority and now governing.
All right. I don't want to keep you real long, but if you don't mind, can we see if we have some questions?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I need 2 monitors. Yes, I do. Can I turn his volume up? I don't know how that was probably asked too long ago. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my bad.
Let me see. Yeah, I have several saying turn up your mic. I'm sorry I didn't see that earlier. Darn it. Elizabeth says I'm hanging my head in shame because I voted for that ballot measure, but so did most of the House and Senate.
Yeah.
Good questions about, again, who defines extraordinary when we talked about extraordinary deaths, illnesses, and whatnot. Let's see. Let me just make sure I don't miss anything. Tammy says, bingo, Rep. Reschke, the governor's order is creating our disaster.
Yeah. That's a smart person there. Gold star.
She's from Marion County. Let me see. I'm not seeing a lot of questions, just a lot of comments. Let me just...
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good one. This comes from Mr. Daniel Bonham, who is watching.
Oh.
I forgot to ask Dexter on the call, but my understanding is she can declare 1 per year, so she could turn around and call another catastrophic disaster in 2021. Is that correct? Do you know?
I don't know. I know it's 1 per something, so I'm not sure if it's 1 per session or 1 per term, so every 2 years, or 1 per biennium, or 1 per year. But yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. If it's 1 per year, she could call one in December here, and then turn around and call another one in February.
We kind of discussed this, but Kevin has a great question. What can you, as our representatives, or we, do to be preemptive against this?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I wrote an article and published it basically on the parts I talked about, whether the criteria are met. You can find that at northwestobserver.com. But my goal was, in that article, was basically to educate, because I'm going to go back to the saying again, the power is not with your legislators right now. The power is with people. And people pressure do affect people in politics. So I think that there was a outcry that this is not constitutional because the conditions aren't met, or what they plan on doing is antithetical to being an Oregonian, or whatever it is. You have to, in order before you do that, you have to understand what they're doing. And so that was part of the reason I wrote the article, and I think that's mostly the reason that Bill did this tonight, is so that people would be educated. So educate yourself. Go read it. It's like 4 or 5 pages, the article, and it's pretty simple. I'm not an attorney. I just read it and gave it face value for what it said, and educate yourself, and then educate your neighbor, because without the knowledge, you can't build a resistance movement.
I want to go just down a very small rabbit trail, because it's connected, but not connected, but connected. I've had a lot of questions here about, and I've received the emails similar to these questions. I know you have too. How do we know our vote was counted here in Oregon? I received a notice that it was received, but I didn't get a notice it was counted. I'm going to answer that one with the most simple answer that I can give to you. So, if you will, picture, I wish I had one in front of me, but picture your envelope with your signature on it. Ballot is inside the envelope. County clerk gets the envelope, sees that Bill Post signed the back of the envelope, makes sure it matches to the computer screen, opens envelope, takes ballot out, which is secret, the ballot, puts it over here in the to be scanned pile. The envelope goes over into this pile, which they keep for a certain amount of time, but now they are separated. I hope this is making sense. They're separated, and on election day, and Bill Burgess from Marion County explained this perfectly in a video, on election day, then the ballots, which are not connected to the envelope anymore, are inserted into the machines to be scanned and voted. So they have no idea if your ballot was counted, only that it was received. And I've had this question so many times, I'm really starting to get tired of explaining this question. The signature is here. It's gone now. The ballot is here. It's being scanned on election day. The two don't meet again. It's a secret ballot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it does in the sense that you want a secret ballot. You don't want your otherwise you would sign your ballot, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody know that's your ballot, and then there's potential for people keeping track of how you voted.
Yep.
And that's something we probably don't want. So, yeah, I've had that question as well, and you just have to explain that that's the process, and there's really no way. The only thing they can do is they can how many signatures do we have? Oh, we got 5,500. How many ballots did we run through? Oh, we ran 5,400 through. Oh, we're short 100 ballots. That doesn't make sense. Find those 100 ballots. Or we're 5,600 ballots. Well, how can that be? We only had 5,500 envelopes. So by tabulation, they can marry up that they did get X number of ballots in the envelopes, and they scanned X number of ballots, and those two numbers should always match.
One more question comes up from Alexis. What about the Supreme Court rulings regarding churches? Kind of a separate issue. Of course, here in Oregon, the Oregon Supreme Court ruled in the Elkhorn Baptist Church suit that the governor did not exceed her executive orders and so on and so forth. I'm not going to explain the whole. But what the U.S. Supreme Court did, it will have an effect. But I had Mr. Kevin Mannix, who's one of the finest attorneys in Oregon, explain to me that now each state has to go and do, I don't know what's called, a writ or whatever, maybe you know, but each state is now, that was a New York case, though it was the U.S. Supreme Court. So now each state has to go before the Supreme Court.
Interesting.
Oh, there's your article. Tammy posted it. Declaring a catastrophe. Okay. Well, I know there's going to be a lot more questions, but I don't want to keep Werner any longer. I really appreciate.
Almost my bedtime.
Well, I know. I mean, down there in Malin, people go to bed early. They get up early.
Well, you have to get early to bed, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy and smart.
Yeah.
So.
Not wealthy, healthy, and wise.
That's right, something like that. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Well, I really appreciate you joining me tonight, and I appreciate our friendship and our working together. Just so the people who are watching this and are used to watching me Babylon, how would you like, or would you like people to contact you? And if so, what's the preferred method?
Sure, you can get a hold of me on Facebook. It's Werner for Oregon is the thing after Facebook.com. You can email me, OregonLegislature.gov/Reschke, and that will take you to my page. Smoke signal works, all that stuff works. So if you want to contact me, feel free.
Okay. All right. You can click on out when you're ready and done, but I really appreciate you, Werner. You're a good guy.
Thanks, Bill. You
all
have
right.
a good evening, good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, I'm going to continue on for just a moment more because I do want to get to some more of the questions and comments. I just didn't want to keep Werner for very long because he's he's an important guy and he has a lot to do. I have no life, so. Okay. I don't want to get into the whole ballot counting and ballot. I gave my explanation. That's not what this was about tonight. This was something that's far more scary and far more perilous. And that is this catastrophic Article 10A special session. If the governor were to declare a catastrophic disaster and this special session. The key here is to understand that anything goes and everything is out the window. There is no way we can stop anything as Republicans. So what can you do? It's been asked several times. What can you do? I'm going to tell you the one thing that I believe that we can do at this time, that you can do. And if you need to write this down, grab a pencil and a paper. But this is what I think, in my humble opinion, that you can do. We can't rely on the Supreme Court. We can't rely on any courts, and I'll tell you why. Not because I don't rely on them or do rely on them, but because it's after the fact, if that makes sense. After the fact. In other words, the session would happen, these bills pass, these funds are grabbed, these things are done, and then we go and file a lawsuit against those things, and it goes to the Supreme Court of Oregon, and so on and so forth, and they make their decision. It's the horse is out of the barn analogy. It'll be too late at that point. You can't put the horse back in the barn. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, whatever you want to call it. And that's my problem with, well, we'll just take it to court. It's hard to put that back in once it's been let out. So I believe that there's one way that you can make a difference ahead of this. And that would mean starting tonight. It requires 8 or more members of the House Democrat Caucus, and it requires 6 or more members of the Senate Democrat Caucus to join the Republicans in the respective chambers, House and Senate, in urging the governor to not call this special session. 1. 2, when we gavel in on January, I believe we're sworn in on January 11th, and our first day of session is January 19th. It could be a motion from the House floor or the Senate floor that says we want to overturn the governor's executive orders. But we need 31 votes in the House, and we need 16 in the Senate. That requires Democrats to join the Republicans. And all of this could go away. Overturn. The legislature is an equal part of the 3 branches of government. Little basic civics. What is it? Judicial, executive, legislative. Equal. One is not more than the other. So, the legislature could overturn the executive orders, and we go back to square one. I'm asking you to send polite, respectful emails and or letters to the members of the Democrat caucus in both the House and the Senate, and to the governor. You're going to say to me, it's not worth it, Bill. They don't ever listen to me. I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But at least you tried. At least you tried. Let me check and make sure there isn't a couple more questions that I can answer about this situation. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about ballot counting machines. Oregon is done. It's been certified. It's done. It is what it is. Look, write an email tonight. Carefully word it, that you make the point that you don't believe there is a catastrophic disaster as was intended by the legislature back in 2011 and by the voters. 59% of the voters in Oregon, 59% of the voters in Oregon said, I want to have this, because they believed that a catastrophe was a catastrophe, as we talked about earlier. So send that polite email saying there's not a catastrophe, don't have this special session. And then send that email to those House and Senate Democrats and say, vote to overturn the executive orders. Well, all right. I guess that'll do it for tonight. I appreciate everybody joining us, and I appreciate Representative Reschke from down in Malin, Oregon, which he truly is. His home is a 9-iron or a pitching wedge from the California border. His backyard. Pretty amazing. Big, big state. Donna brings up a good point. I wrote 11 letters recently to Republicans in office and a couple of Democrats and got zero response from anyone. Okay, let me tell you, here's the problem with writing a letter. We're not in the building. The Capitol is closed. If you watched my live video from the other day, the Capitol is closed. Now, we can go in there if we park in the garage and go up the elevator to our office, but the Capitol is closed. There's nobody there. So I get my mail like once a month, maybe. I get email every day right here on this laptop. Now, if they don't answer your emails, look, I can't make people answer their emails. I answer every email I get. But that's just me because I'm obsessive compulsive and I'm ADD and a whole lot of other things. So I find the emails the best way. Elizabeth, yep, this live video it'll return around and you can replay it as you see fit, and you can copy and paste the link and share it wherever you want. As soon as I stop it, it'll be there. Okay, well, thank you all. David, like I said, written letters are more effective than emails, but when there's nobody there to get your written mail, then it's not very effective. Okay, have a great evening. Have a great weekend. I wish you all the best. We'll try to do something again next Friday. If not, then the next Friday. We'll see what we do. But you have a great weekend, and we'll talk.